Hello everyone, today we are going to take a look at a couple of the best sculpts of Edmontosaurus species which are currently available on the market. These are the two I have. There are other versions available as well, of course. It's just personal aesthetic preference. I prefer sort of Haolonggood and PNSO figures, so these are the ones I've got. And of course with Haolonggood figures there's always alternative versions as well. I've gone for this sort of greenish and purplish version just because I thought it was a bit of an unusual colour scheme, and it looks really good. It really sets the details off on this fantastic little sculpt. But first of all, we're going to set the Haolonggood one to one side, and we're going to take a closer look at PNSO's absolutely magnificent, great big version of Edmontosaurus annectens here. So I've had some requests to have a closer look at this enormous figure. I've had this figure for a little while and I've had absolutely no problems with it warping or distorting or falling over. And I mean, I know this is England and this area of England's quite cold, but nonetheless this figure sits on top of a Victorian fern book in a sunbeam and there hasn't been any problems with it warping or distorting at all. I've been quite lucky. I've heard of other people who've had them and have had issues with it falling over. Absolutely no issues to report whatsoever with this one, despite the slightly adverse conditions it's subjected to. So looking at the overall pose of this figure and the paintwork, you can see they've gone for these lovely sort of dappled tones, these lovely sort of chocolatey greyish undertones and beiges. It's all very, very subtle across the body of the sculpt and really shows up all the muscular detail and everything they've put into this. And this, rather like PNSO's Parasaurolophus, is a very muscular depiction of a hadrosaur. A lot of PNSO's hadrosaurs, I don't have them. I do have the Olorotitan, which is a finer one, as well as the Parasaurolophus, which is a big bulky one like this. The likes of the Corythosaurus tend to be quite finely built and lanky and have very tiny dainty horse-like feet, which wasn't entirely accurate. But here they've really taken all the scientific information that's known about Edmontosaurus, and a lot is known about Edmontosaurus in terms of the skin detail and the musculature as well, because we'll have some fantastic mummified specimens of it, including one which has been being excavated probably for over 20 years now, because it's an extraordinarily hard sandstone, and that preserved so much detail. It's almost like looking at a living animal. So I think PNSO have based most of the research on that. It was indeed that specimen, which is known as Dakota, after where it was found of course, which showed that Edmontosaurus at some times in its life had a hoof on the front foot. The front foot of hadrosaurs, such as Edmontosaurus, has been reconstructed in various ways in the past. Originally they were thought to have flippers almost to help the animal in swimming because they have this sort of superficially duck-like beak. Duck-billed dinosaurs, and the association was made that they lived in swamps, rather like the long-necked dinosaurs. Of course we know that's not true. We also know that from other specimens they didn't all have a hoof. So there's more research which needs to be done, but it's lovely to see it depicted on this figure. This is where one of the minor nitpicks with this figure arises, because you'll see that the hoof on the right foot here, which is raised off the ground, it's almost like a little nail there, is far smaller than the hoof on the left foot, which is bearing the weight. As hoof obviously is a hard material, I can't even attribute this to this being weight spreading that out. That is just a sculptural quirk, that the hoof on the left foot is a full twice the size of the foot on the right foot, and it's just a peculiarity. It doesn't really detract from the figure at all. Another figure also came in for some flack because Edmontosaurus annectens is not known for having a fleshy crest on the head. Its relative Regalis, which we'll see when we look at the Haolonggood version, was. PNSO have gone ahead and put a fleshy crest on the top of Edmontosaurus annectens here regardless, and it's beautifully sculpted and I don't mind it at all, because there's probably all sorts of things we really don't know I can say for sure about these animals, and that is a fantastically beautifully rendered fleshy looking crest on top of the head of this beautiful Edmontosaurus. It's a lovely bright blue eye. Bright blue eyes are definitely becoming something of a trope with dinosaur figures now. think most of the dinosaur figures I've got now seem to have bluish eyes. Seem to be started by Safari's Griposaurus. If I zoom in on the head here, you can see how many fine details and textures PNSO have sculpted here, especially along the ridge of the top of the nose. There's a minor seam line here, but of course on larger figures that's slightly more noticeable. Beautifully sculpted nostrils. The beak overall, I don't feel it's as well sculpted as the beak of the PNSO version, but apart from that, this figure is in every way as excellent as the PNSO version. There is even texturing on these large flat tabulate scales on the neck. You can see it's got a crest of spines along the back, which is known. These aren't painted a different colour, they're just simply blended in with the tones of the body, but that doesn't really detract from the figure. You can also see these clusters of larger pattern scales all over the body, which is a really nice touch. Hadrosaurs seem to have had quite thick skin. A sample found in the last couple of years seemed to contradict that, but we don't say. I think that possibly wasn't the whole story. Hadrosaurs are found mummified more than most other species of dinosaurs. You can see how the scales down the arm here are thicker and tougher. When you look at the figure from this angle as well, you can see the bulk of the belly. That looks really fleshy and soft there. Of course, the musculature and the movement of the limbs. For such a big animal, they've really given it a fantastic sense of movement. If I just bring clear deering out here, you get a kind of idea about how large Edmontosaurus and ectons could get. This one, of course, is on the larger end of the scale depiction. It's absolutely magnificent. It's fantastic big deep musculature in the tail. Absolutely amazing sense of movement and weight and heft with it. Tremendous stuff from PNSO, as usual, as you would expect. But up and coming, of course, we have Haolonggood. Now, Haolonggood sculpts, I absolutely adore them. They've got so much character. You can again see that we've got the blue eye going on here, and their figure is a lot more colourful. You see there's a big difference in the shape of the head with this one as well. I think the beak on this one's more nicely sculpted, if I'm brutally honest. Apart from that, in terms of sculpt, they're pretty equal. Again, this one depicts the hoof, but the feet are both the same size on this particular sculpt. Of course, this is one of two versions. Haolonggood always released two different colour versions. I chose this one just because it's a bit different. Lovely patterning and stripes here. You don't quite get the individual clusters of scales across the body, the ornamental scales that you do with the PNSO version, but you still get a lot of very, very fine scale detail. Absolutely remarkable. It hasn't quite got the sense of movement and difference in body textures that much larger PNSO version has, but this is a far smaller, more budget figure, and it still has all this fantastic detail on the neck, and you can see those scales are actually bulged and wrinkled as well, where the head's turned slightly to the left. You've also got some little ornamental scales on the underside of the jaw here. Eyes not quite as precisely painted as PNSO's, but again, for the quality you get with Haolonggood figures, they're absolutely tremendous. It's an absolutely beautiful figure. And I imagine the other version is equally so. When you come to the underside here, you've got much finer textures. And again, you get a lovely sense of the bulk of the animal. Because this is a slightly different, slightly smaller species here, of course you're not going to get quite the same sort of sense of heft and weight, but these two figures are on scale with each other. And you can see that it was still a very, very large animal. Considerably larger than most mammalian herbivores will have today, and certainly a lot longer. Let's pop Claire out the way, and I shall bring Sue here in for comparison. So, of course, Edmontosaurus was contemporaneous with Tyrannosaurus rex, and you can see that whilst regardless here probably would have been a fairly easy snack for T-Rex. Ectons is known to have survived Tyrannosaur attacks. There are specimens which show a nip out the tail, which looks like it's been taken out by a juvenile. And you can see how large it is compared to Sue here. And the head's not too far off the same length. Absolutely fantastic stuff. So it's really nice to see hadrosaurs shown some real respect and really brought to life. And PNSO and Haolonggood have both done a fantastic job with these figures. I mean, in terms of colours and patterns and size and bulk and sculpt, they're absolutely outstanding companies. It's fantastic now that as dinosaur collectors we're getting these beautiful, brilliant figures, and we're getting them so regularly. And of course PNSO started up bringing new figures out as well. They've unveiled a Lokiceratops very recently. All of these figures, I get them everything from Everything Dinosaur. I've placed another order with Everything Dinosaur today for a Beast of the Mesozoic figure, or is it Mesozoic? We shall see tomorrow when it arrives. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this video with me and seeing these fantastic hadrosaur figures, and I hope to see you in the next video.